8:35 exactly. You're with me, Julie Ali, on the mid-morning. Pardon. It's News and Views with me, Julie Ali, and it's not 8:35. It is 9:35 a.m. Central African time. We're crossing over now to Palestine. Palestinian protesters and security forces clashed in the occupied West Bank city of Ramallah on Saturday, a third day of demonstrations sparked by an activist's death. Let's hear what that was all about with human rights activist. The activist name is Abdallah Grifat, and the organization is called Meezaan. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure entirely. Sad day or a sad few days for Palestinians, because here it's Palestinian violence upon Palestinian people. It's clashes of the Palestinian Authority for their hardline tactics against activists and such. What exactly happened there?
Well, it's definitely a sad day, and it's actually outrageous for us as Palestinians. And this reminds me a lot of what you as South Africans used to call the third force, or the people who usually will collaborate with the settlers, with the colonizers who occupy our land. Unfortunately, what happened with the activist Nizar Banat on a few days ago, when he was arrested and was beaten up until he was killed and he died in custody, it's absolutely outrageous. Also, on top of that, beating up protesters and journalists is totally unacceptable for us as Palestinian activists and Palestinian people in general, and for the supporters of the Palestinian people. And this just shows us that, unfortunately, the Palestinian Authority is losing, its credibility, and is losing the vision that we would like it to have.
So obviously, Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority is not popular or not recognized by the larger Palestinian community. Question number one. And question number two, we know that Nizar Banat, who was killed in custody, had registered as a candidate in Palestinian parliamentary elections, which was supposed to have happened in May, but Mahmoud Abbas postponed them indefinitely. Do you think this was a deliberate ploy, his arrest, just to get him out of the system, his arrest and his killing? Because he was going to be... Carry on.
Not just because of the elections, but also because of his criticism of the corruption that's been happening in the Palestinian Authority. Unfortunately, you asked a question about the credibility and even about the legitimacy of Mahmoud Abbas and the members of the Palestinian Authority. As you say, the elections was postponed indefinitely. And we as Palestinians, or many people here on the ground, see that as actually cancellation of the elections. And that's simply because Mahmoud Abbas and the current members of the PA see that or know that they will lose badly if there was an election. As a matter of fact, Mahmoud Abbas's term was ended about 10 years ago. Yet he still acts as he's, the president. And every time there is a call and there is an agreement to hold an election, Mahmoud Abbas cancels that again. Definitely, Nizar Banat was an activist on the ground, and he was running for elections. But he's not the only one. He's not the first one that is, in a way, eliminated out of the race because of his disagreements with the methods of the Palestinian Authority.
How has Hamas responded to the killing of this activist, Nizar Banat? Because, on the one hand, you have Hamas, they're the militant arm of the struggle of the Palestinian people. And on the other hand, you have the Palestinian Authority, the so-called grouping of people who are looking after, or supposedly looking after, the interests of the Palestinian people. How do you young people view all of this?
Okay, definitely. This is, I must say, this is a quite a tricky question for me because of where I live. I obviously can't say a lot, but I would still say that Hamas, like other groups, and again, Hamas and Fatah are not the only two political parties in Palestine, right? And so Hamas did condemn the killing of Meezaan and the beating up of the protesters, but all the other parties, as a matter of fact, even within Fatah, there are people who call also for against what's happening, and they were against the cancellation of the elections, and so vast majority of the Palestinian people and parties and civil society organizations and everybody I would say, who is not benefiting from the Palestinian Authority is against what's happening here on the ground. And maybe I should explain that the way the Palestinian Authority came to exist was also criticized. For those who don't know, the Palestinian Authority was created after the Oslo Accords in 1994, when the agreement was that the Palestinian Authority will recognize Israel as a state, unfortunately, in exchange for that, Israel will only recognize the Palestinian Authority as the only representative of the Palestinian people, which is absolutely outrageous. How can we take, in a way, our representatives being decided by the Israelis who represent us? And this was the beginning of, the disaster. And we always, Palestinians here say that it's another Nakba, actually, when the Palestinian Authority was formed. And they absolutely, it was formed without popular consent, and it definitely doesn't represent the views and the aspirations of the Palestinian people who are fighting a just cause and are trying to win the liberation. And what's happening here is I don't want to upset too many people when I'm speaking, but it's definitely unacceptable.
Let's take the Israelis out of the equation and let's just focus on the Palestinian people. What would be the ideal situation for you people as Palestine? How would you like to be governed? By whom? And how would you guys like to interact with each other and move forward? Because that's the only way you can overcome your common enemy, which is Israel.
Definitely. Well, that's a very beautiful question. It's fantastic. I wish we always we get asked this question. And yes, definitely, we want liberation, we want freedom, we want to be led by our own people, and we definitely against the two-state solution. It's not a two-state solution; it's a two-state problem. We want to liberate the whole of Palestine. To be more realistic, we would say that we would take like the South African in a way resolution, and that is the one state solution, and we would want to live in peace and harmony in our own land. I'm not going to name any specific party because I don't want to. Obviously, there's legal implications on whatever I say, so I can't really now come out and say that there's a particular political party that we support or don't support. That's up to the Palestinian people to decide in a free election. We would love to have a democratic, socialist democratic state that is led by law and rule and a progressive constitution, obviously, that has strong civil society organizations, and that is a thriving society. Palestinian people are, alhamdulillah, and I brag here, we are clever people, and we can build a very prosperous nation, if we are given freedom. And that's what we want. We want to be treated like normal human beings. We want to have our own state, definitely, but we don't want to, normalize colonialism and be, ruled by colonial powers and use that and paint it as if it's democratic. What we are living now is a one state, but we have different rights. Obviously, the Israelis have more rights, and Palestinians have no rights whatsoever. And we want to change the power dynamics where everybody here lives in justly and with justice and freedom to everybody who's living here in this land.
Alhamdulillah, you are a very resilient people. I think you are widely admired globally for your resilience and for standing for justice, for standing up for justice and to be recognized as the true people of the land of Palestine. My final question to you, how is this now going to move forward in terms of Nizar Banat's death and the protests? Are you going to cut off at some point in time? What are you asking for?
So we definitely what's happening now is that people are very angry for the treatment of people who oppose the Palestinian Authority. Nizar Banat is not the first one; is not going to be the last one. And there is many more policies like the security coordination between the Palestinian Authority and Israel that's also totally unacceptable. There are many cases of corruption that's happening in the Palestinian Authority that we wanted to we want the authorities to deal with that like correctly. What ideally would happen now, what people are calling for mostly is for elections, so we can move a step forward. Is obviously the election is not going to be to bring, it's not magic, it's not going to bring freedom, but it's a step forward. The problem that we have here in Palestine is that while we are fighting or while we are demanding on the Palestinian Authority to be more firm on our side, we are also fighting against the Israeli occupation and the colonialism of in here. Like now there is also, so the reason I'm mentioning that is because every day there is something new. Like if Israel now demolishes a few houses, people will quickly jump and say like, you know what, let's focus on what's happening there and let's fight Israel, which is true. But there is also, we need to clean our house in a way. So it's very, very, very tricky what's happening. But again, fair and free elections will be a step forward. And inshallah, we hope that we manage to do that.
Ameen, Suma. Ameen. Jazakallah for bringing this different perspective to the conversation on the issue of the Palestinian people. Abdallah Grifat from the Meezaan Palestinian Human Rights Institute. We will talk with you again in the future, inshallah. Our du'as are with the people of Palestine. Assalamu alaikum to you.
Wa alaikum assalam.
9:48 exactly, and in a minute or two we'll be talking about the crypto scam in light of the Kaji brothers.